Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the White Collar Advice channel. I am your humbled host, Justin Paperny, and I'm proud to introduce Alec Burlakoff, who's new to our team, but frankly, he's worked with our team for many, many years, including when he was a defendant a long, long time ago. So, Alec, welcome back. Welcome to our team. We want to be transparent and we want to let people know that we don't ask people to do what we haven't done, and you did the work. It's a big part of the reason you're now on our team. Help everyone understand your journey through the criminal justice system, or said a little better, why did you become the subject of a government investigation?
I became the subject of a government investigation because of my role as head of sales with a publicly traded pharmaceutical company by the name of Insys. And eventually I was charged. So I moved from subject to target and eventually was indicted and charged with RICO conspiracy.
And once you learned that you were a target, how did you respond? In other words, working or hiring a lawyer, begin the mitigation process, help people understand your response in those early stages.
Well, when I first became aware that I was a target, the first thing I did was get an attorney. Went through a series of interviews with attorneys to try to find what I thought would be the best one for me. After I put an attorney in place, I still was having a tremendous amount of anxiety and sleepless nights. I kind of felt like I needed to do more than just hire an attorney. I think everyone pretty much hires an attorney if they can get one. If not, they'll get one appointed. But I started to think about what I had always done in the past in my entire life, which was taking action. And I was uncomfortable with the fact that I was basically sitting around delegating, waiting for my attorney to do something. I quickly realized that that wasn't going to work for me simply because it's never worked for me in the past. And I started scouring the internet and eventually came across your group, White Collar Advice.
When you reached out to our team, you had a lot of concerns, uh, not just potentially going to prison, which you did, but some of the collateral consequences that accompany a government investigation. Can you touch on just what some of those collateral consequences are? Because I know they keep a lot of people up at night.
Well, the collateral consequences are real. Your phone stops ringing almost instantaneously. And the people that were so-called your friends and colleagues that were there for you through thick and thin uh, suddenly disappear. And for me, I realized that it was now more than ever that I needed to provide myself with the appropriate support network, a group of people that I could rely on, get advice from, get strategy from, and also just to help keep my morale up. And like I said, the people that were there for me in the past were no longer present. And that was, for me, quite frankly, an eye opener, but also an awakening and positive experience for me, the beginning of a positive experience. Because again, I went out to cultivate new relationships and a new network. And what I had found specifically with Justin and Michael, you and your colleague, was that I was going to finally once again be in a position where I could take action, take very specific steps to move forward, and taking action alone immediately started to alleviate my anxiety because it put me back in a position of power and strength.
One thing that Alec did well, and this is something I assure you might pop up with some of you, Alec had a very good lawyer, but very expensive law firm out of Boston. We're talking the big expensive ones, big expensive hourly rate. And with that comes a lot of experience from a lawyer who might be really, their thoughts are ingrained on how to prepare. And I'm sharing this with you because Alec watched the videos our team had done with judges. I think Alec even spoke with a couple of clients of ours as we were going through this process. But I told him there could be some pushback with the mitigation that our team is going to create. And I would say with every 10 lawyers that our team works with, one or two offers that pushback. The narrative is too long. Let me handle and do all of this. I'm a former United States attorney, and some defendants cower and don't move forward. Alex said, well, I want you to articulate, because there were some tough conversations where you would call and say, lawyer loves it, but we're not going to use all of it. Lawyer loves it, but we're going to shorten it. Lawyer's going to use this and put it into his memorandum in his own words and not mine. And you were frustrated. So I want you to encourage and tell people about the advocacy that you did when you would have these frustrating days that you weren't getting the feedback that you wanted?
Well, I can address that on two different angles. First of all, if you listen to the videos from Judge Bennett and Judge Burough, which I listen to at least 100 times, they'll tell you that they want to hear from the defendant as it pertains to advocation. Um, Coming from an attorney, they expect that. Coming from a defendant, from my understanding, more times than not, they don't hear anything. So if you're willing to put yourself forward, that's a huge opportunity for you. And then for me personally, based on my life experiences and all the things that I had done, some good, a lot of good, a couple not so bad. Um, I always knew that I was going to be my best advocate. So as soon as I kind of flipped that switch and did a 180 and said, no, I'm not going to leave it all in the hands of my attorney and hope that everything works out well. I'm going to take this into my own hands. I started to do the work. And there's a lot of work to do. But first and foremost, you have to begin to get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, because there's a lot of people that are going to tell you they want to take full control. And in the end of the day, it was my life and my liberty at stake. And the moment I came to the conclusion that I was going to be the biggest self-proponent in this entire process moving forward, like I said, not only did I start to feel better, but I started to see things starting to work slowly but surely in my favor.
There's a lot of press around Alec's case. I'll put up some links from Dateline to 60 Minutes, and a movie recently came out on Netflix. Is it Painkillers, Pain Hustlers?
Pain Hustlers, Painkillers is another one that was either put on Netflix or another major network, but this movie was Painkillers.
Got it.
I'm
And
sorry.
Alec consulted on that film and not proud of what he did and finding his way to federal prison, but he's clearly committed to making amends. He speaks at universities with me, USC recently. So it's one thing to commit a crime. It's another thing to be remorseful and share lessons learned. Let's lead up to sentencing in front of Judge Burough. As I understand it, the government was still seeking as much as 60 months in federal prison at your sentencing hearing. And what was the end result? And when were you sentenced to prison?
Yeah, so the prosecution was still seeking over 5 years, but my sentencing guidelines, I was looking at over to 20. And in the end of the day, the judge sentenced me to 26 months in federal prison.
Now, one thing Judge Burough, as I recall, some judges want fewer character reference letters, and our team encourages to have a sense of who your judge is. I had Judge Wilson that favors fewer letters. Judge Hall in Connecticut, we've had a client turn in 60 letters. I think Judge Burough was receptive to mitigation. More letters. You had a pretty long narrative. You even worked on a manuscript with our team. So you had a favorable judge that was willing to review and go through your work. Do you feel as if that had an impact? Because it was pretty extensive and expensive.
Yeah, I mean, for me, first of all, for anybody, expensive is all relative. For me, it meant a lot more to try to get out and get to a place where I would have more freedom so that I can continue forward with my life. That meant the world to me. That was invaluable. So time for me was more valuable than money. Money wasn't coming easy to me at that point, but I scraped and clawed to find whatever resources I could to help myself advocate for myself. But yeah, Judge Burough was very receptive. In fact, at sentencing, she made mention of my character letters and then specifically talked about the letter from my daughter, who was 14 at the time. And my daughter had a tremendous amount of feelings to deal with what I was going through. And she's still dealing with that to this day. And she was having a hard time articulating those feelings and putting them on paper. So I was very fortunate to be able to put her in touch with you and Michael and your team and have them review that together and put something on paper that made sense and that was truly straight from the heart. And that is what Judge Burroughs wanted to hear. She made it really clear that she was unimpressed with letters that might come from a senator to a friend of a friend, but much more in tune to people who could speak directly to my character over the course of almost 40 years.
So for
And
all of you, for all of you listening in our podcast or watching here on YouTube as you prepare for sentencing, listen to what Alec just said. That aligns with what Judge Bennett told Michael Santos in a YouTube video, or what I heard at a conference last year with Judge Gutierrez. Gonzalez Rogers, forgive me, in Northern California, talked about character reference letters. They should speak to your character. They're not influenced by influential people. If that person cannot speak to your character, your letter should not enable your conduct or excuse. They should speak to your character, similar to your personal narrative that Alec was very invested in. Who are you? What have you learned? It's one thing to say you'll never return to another courtroom. What evidence are you building to prove you will never return to another courtroom? Never forget, and I used to convey this to Alec when we would speak on days where he was down, like any defendant is down, right? It's hard to do the work, especially when you can feel depressed and lonely and frustrated and isolated. Alec was willing to do the work on those days where he wanted to do just about anything else. And that's part of the reason, instead of 20 years, 10 years, 7 years, 5 years, he got 26 months in federal prison, because he built that record. Only you can do that work, which is why our team says, if you can do it on your own, do it now. If you'd like our team, we're available, but it has to begin. Let's talk about federal prison. As I understand it, you served your 26-month sentence in Miami Federal Prison Camp.
yes, that's correct.
We'll spend some more time in future videos on prison, but I would like to touch on your experience in the minimum security camp. Was it what you had expected? Could you give us a lay of the land, so to speak? Weights, a track, a dorm, cubicle, pod? Give us a little breakdown of the prison, if you would.
Yeah, well, I did as much research as I possibly could, and in the end of the day, yeah, I would still say it wasn't what I expected. However, in many ways, it was a lot better than I expected, because of the opportunities I had to truly focus on myself and the work. Because the work started before I went into the minimum security, but it certainly was far from complete. And I had a lot of work to do. And I was I feel I was very fortunate to have the time to focus, to introspect, to memorialize, to write every day, to document. And you're right, Justin, when you alluded to the fact that when you and I talked before I went in, there were days when I didn't want to do the work. But those were the exact days that I thanked myself for the fact that I came out and I sought you guys. Because when even I was a teacher before I ever got into pharmaceuticals, and I found that some of the times where I got the most out of my students is when I put them into groups and they were able to collaborate, and they were excited and given ideas on what to work on. And that's kind of what I got from you guys. So when there were days when I didn't want to do the work, but I had the work sitting in front of me, and I knew if I did it, I would feel better because at least I accomplished something that day, not only for the short term, but perhaps for the long term. And I saw the long term effects, by the way, years later. Um, it's all about the work. And as far as being inside, um, it's no different than being on the outside. It's what you make of it. If you want to work and you want to produce and you want to get better and you want to ensure that you have a more productive journey, then you're going to do that. If you want to sit around and lie in bed and play cards or games along those lines, which I never once got involved in, never once, you can do that. But in the end of the day, you know that clock is ticking. For me, it was only a 26-month sentence, but for many of the people, it's 3, 5, 7 years or even more. The result is always going to be the same. You're going to come home. And if you don't realize quickly that if you don't start preparing immediately, meaning there's no time too early to prepare and there's no time too late to prepare, the bottom line is that you get to the work immediately. If you don't realize that, you're going to start to panic when you get closer to release, because you're going to find out that you haven't done any of the necessary things that you needed to do to make sure that you're going to be successful. Look, we talk about hitting the ground running. When I got out, did I hit the ground running? No. But did I hit the ground jogging? I absolutely did. I had a really good sense of where I was going, based on the work that I did while I was inside, and then also in the halfway house, Justin.
Well, let's talk a few more minutes about life in the camp. And I know some guys can gamble all day and sleep the day away, and most are really productive and want to prepare for the inevitable problems that follow someone who has a felony conviction. So give us a little more insight into your day. What time did you get up? What was your job? How many hours a day did you exercise? I want people to have an understanding of one day of your life on the inside. So let's start there. What was your job?
Okay, so I mean, I was an orderly, and quite frankly, I chose that job. I started off in the kitchen initially, but tried to transition out as soon as possible because I had very clear direction as it pertained to what I needed to do to ensure that I was on a productive path. So my day was very consistent. I woke up at 6 a.m. I went to breakfast. I came back, got cleaned up, showered, and so forth, got dressed in my greens, which was my uniform, and then I would do my job. As an orderly, my job was to clean the showers, the toilets, the sinks, and make sure the floor was mopped. And that would take me an hour. So that would leave me with a couple hours before lunch. I would read a book, depending on the length of the book. Sometimes I would knock it out quickly. Other times it would take me a couple days, but I would do a book report, at least 2 book reports a week based on the books that I've read. And then I would write those book reports out on email and send them to my wife at the time. And she was keeping everything in order for me. I had written the majority of my book prior to going in, but I had not completed it. I couldn't complete it because I felt that for me, the book wouldn't be ready for completion until I had been released, at least from prison, if not even the halfway house. So I had a lot of work to do on my manuscript as well. But the daily documentation of what I was doing on a daily basis, just kind of not writing per se, oh, this is ready to go into my book, but just getting my thoughts on paper was critical in the completion of my manuscript. But so that would be my book and my book report in the morning. And then I would go to lunch. Then after lunch, I would exercise for an hour and a half, which sounds like a lot of time, and it is. I don't exercise nearly that long on the outside, but I had the time, so I did it. And quite frankly, for me, lights out was 10 p.m. I wanted to make sure that I went to bed at 10:05. So I wanted to make sure that my day was as productive as possible so that I would be tired enough to go to bed when the lights went out. So I would work out for an hour and a half, then I would come back and I'd get to work again. I'd spend the majority of the rest of my day before dinner in the computer room. And I would be writing. I might take one incident that I observed during the day where I was working as an orderly, cleaning the bathrooms where no one's supposed to come in. And somebody came in and walked all over the floor and I had to remop the floor. I mean, it could be as trivial as that. It could be that I went for commissary and waited online for 3 hours. I desperately needed a pair of sneakers when I first got in. I didn't have anything. And they were out of sneakers. It could be something like that. But I had a mail list, I think of a maximum of 30. And I can tell you that the people that I wrote to every single day told me that their significant others, their spouses, their loved ones were waiting for them to read my email out loud, reporting the day-to-day activity of my day on the inside. And then dinner would come around. I'd come back. I might exercise again for another hour. I usually did. And then I would get back to my reading and journaling.
So there's a lot to unpack there. And I just want to summarize a few things that Alec said. I can assure you, Alec had opportunities to have someone do his job in prison or pay someone to do his job in prison. And Alec humbly mentioned that he was a sales leader for a publicly traded company. The truth is, it was a billion-dollar company, and he was leading a billion-dollar sales organization. So to humbly go from that to doing his job in prison, when I know he had opportunities to have somebody else do it, and he shouldn't be applauded for doing his job. I'm not applauding you, but we know there are many people on the inside who would pay someone to do their work or not do it at all. And he said, this is what they've assigned me to do. I'm going to be the best orderly that I can possibly be. He also talked about—
It's funny that you say that,
Go
Justin,
ahead.
real quick. When I got into the residential reentry center, they told me I needed to get a job right away. I said, is anybody doing the bathrooms? And they said, yeah, we split that up into 3 jobs. You're just responsible for the showers. And I was like, I can do that. I'm ready to do that. And the guys My roommates in the halfway house said the showers were cleaner than they'd seen in 6 months. So I think it's important that you take pride in what you do, whatever that is. And yes, have I been humbled? Of course, I've been humbled.
So he also touched on memorializing the journey. That's another word for release plan, sharing that with his family, with people in his network, with his probation officer, with potential employers, with his judge. Some will read it, some will not. The point is, he chose to do the work, which leads to wrapping up this video in life after prison. I know it wasn't easy at any time coming home from prison, but you mentioned you hit the ground not running, but jogging. You've been home now for a few years. Talk about that transition. I filmed a video I have yet to post called The Dark Days After Federal Prison. Sometimes in our mind on the inside, we have an idea of what it's going to be like. And then we're home and we're like, it's not exactly what I thought it would be like. So let's talk about that transition and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, the transition was tumultuous. It's a lot of change. You get out of prison, you go to the halfway house. I was in the halfway house for 9 months. A lot of people tell you they'd rather be in prison than get 9 months halfway house, but I couldn't disagree more. I thought the halfway house compared to prison was just another step in the right direction, and I was thrilled to be there. Not to mention that there's a tremendous amount of liberties that you get. If you do things the right way, you can eventually go to work. You can have a cell phone, all kinds of things. But getting out, I had to take a job that, excuse me for coming across maybe even arrogant, but I did have to take a job that I felt was beneath my skill set. And I worked in a phone room in a cubicle. I went from working at a desk with all glass windows in the corner office on the 6th floor of a building into working in a cubicle with guys all around me speaking so loud that sometimes I literally had to kind of get halfway underneath the desk just so that I can hear the other person on the phone. But I had a plan, and my plan was realistic. A lot of times people, including you and Michael per se, specifically said, Alec, you've got to be realistic here. You're not getting out of prison and taking over $1 billion company. That's not happening. And so I was ready for that. And I was appreciative of the opportunity that somebody was willing to employ me literally within weeks of getting out. And I worked very, very hard. And in some ways, I worked harder than I ever have because I never really worked in an office. I always had the freedom to go and do what I needed to do during the day. But I was stuck there, and I was putting in 70-hour weeks. But I was able to pay bills and begin paying restitution, taking care of my kids again, paying rent. Eventually I got out of where I was living when I first moved out and got into a place that's my own, right? And I continue to set realistic goals for me. Justin, I'm still not running. And I've been out 3 years. But I'm jogging, and I don't think there's anyone that's out there that'll tell you that jogging on a daily basis isn't extremely healthy. So I feel good about where I'm at, but I absolutely expect to run at full speed again and be extremely exhausted when I'm done running or sprinting, because that's what I've been doing my whole life. I've been sprinting, but I've got to get into my stride. And I'd like to think that I'm just now about hitting my full stride.
I would agree with that. Let's wrap up with a final question. What advice would you give to others who are finding themselves immersed in a government investigation? They've just learned it's their name versus the United States of America. Final thought, final question, advice for them.
Take action. Don't just sit and wait. It's too easy to say, oh, my whole world is collapsing. There's nothing I can do. It's quite the opposite. This is the first time where you don't get to make a decision of whether or not you're going to do anything. You literally have to come to the conclusion that you must make a decision to take action. And then the other thing that I would say is understand the people that have taken action against you, understand their mindset, understand that the only thing they are focusing on is that one specific criminal act that you've been indicted for. And that it is your responsibility to do everything in your power to allow all the stakeholders, the government, the prosecutors, your case manager in prison, your probation officer, pre-trial and post release, that they know who you are as a person from all aspects and angles, the good, bad, and the ugly, because you want people to see you as a human being. And what I realized and what I felt, literally could feel it from the moment they put me in handcuffs on the day the FBI came in and raided me. I knew right away that they did not see me as a human being. They saw me as some derelict or somebody who's just going to be called a number when they get into prison. And I just think that you know better, meaning I knew better. And anybody that's indicted knows better. They know that they are more than just what the government sees them at. But the question is, what are they doing to show people, to actually prove it? I'll close with this. Judge Bennett's interview, he said, if a little kid breaks the window, right? He's playing ball and he misses the ball and it goes through the window. And instead of him just saying, I'm sorry, he says, listen, I have a job after school babysitting. I've already figured out how much this is going to cost. Here's my plan in which I'm going to repay you. And I'm going to start documenting and memorializing the work that I do that I do on a daily basis to repay this so that you can repair your window. It's taking action. The moment I started taking action, I noticed that people started taking notice. Now, I didn't do it for people to take notice. I did it for me. But in the end of the day, you start with yourself and you'll see the ripple effect.
Really good messaging. It's part of the reason you went from a potential very long sentence to a much shorter sentence, more halfway house time, more liberty, and now you move from jogging to sprinting. So welcome formally to our team, even though we've been working together since 2018-ish. Happy New Year. Welcome to our team, and thank you for speaking so honestly.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks again for having me. And I'm super excited to be a part of the team. It's an honor and a privilege, and I'm just super excited to get this great work out to everyone that's was in the same position I was in not too long ago.